Hey guys, welcome to today's video. If you are new to my channel, something that I like to do sometimes is turn my camera on and do my makeup all while I tell you a story about a significant historical figure that has piqued my interest lately. Today, we're talking about Mary Tudor of England, also better known as Bloody Mary. Not your Sunday morning cocktail, nor the little games that you used to play at sleepovers when you were a kid. The actual real person, Mary. So anyways, Bloody Mary time. Here we go. So Mary Tudor was born in the early 1500s. She was the daughter of Catherine of Aragon and King Henry VIII. Now, maybe you're not fully studied up on your 14th century English royalty, but I would still bet that you've probably heard about King Henry VIII. He's the one that, had several of his wives executed. Several. For the most part, it seemed like Mary's childhood was pretty okay. Her mom, Catherine of Aragon, seemed really chill. Frankly, is probably the least problematic character in this story. And her father, Henry VIII, he kind of liked her, I guess, when she was born. But she was born to the King and Queen of England, so she, of course, was a princess. So she grew up with all of the bells and whistles that comes along with being a child of royalty, right? It was in her early teenage years that her life would start to kind of take a downward turn. You see, King Henry, Mary's father, was the embodiment of toxic masculinity at its finest. He decided that he wanted to invalidate his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, get a divorce, basically. The issue, though, was that the reigning religion over England at the time was Catholicism, which very strictly prohibits divorce. And I won't go into details about his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. He married his brother's widow, is basically the issue. But more than that, he wanted to marry someone else. He had this little lady named Anne Boleyn, and he wanted to marry her instead. So yeah, King Henry decided to cut ties with the Pope and convert the entire country of England to Protestantism. He was a Protestant now. He, of course, figured out a way to get his divorce to Catherine of Aragon, and he wanted Mary to, sign a treaty that said she was an illegitimate child of his. At first, she refused to do it, nevertheless, was fully stripped of her royal titles and privileges, and was put into a literal Cinderella situation. She was separated from her mother. She had all of her fancy royal clothes and jewelry taken away from her. Nobody was allowed to call her Princess Mary anymore. It was now Lady Mary. And her dad's new wife, Anne Boleyn, gave birth to Elizabeth, who was a very fascinating character all on her own, but we will only talk about the parts of her story that are relevant to Mary's story today. So her new little sister was the new princess on the block, and Mary was forced into servitude for her. She was made to be a servant for her new little sister. Not only that, but Elizabeth's caretakers really were pretty nasty to Mary. Like I said, she was separated from her mother, never allowed to see her mother. She was never allowed to see her father either. Not that he even wanted to see her because he didn't like her anymore. She was subjected to verbal and physical abuse is what it said. So she was just having a great time in her new life as a non-princess. And not only all of that, but also when she was a little bit older teenager, she started to have excruciatingly painful periods, cramping, that kind of stuff. She had a condition which is thought today to be endometriosis. But of course, back then, they didn't know about that, so they just called it her bad lady times, But she apparently became extremely ill. She had excruciatingly painful periods. She was depressed and fatigued all the time. I'll say this about period pains. I just know that I have had cramping so bad to the point where I would get dizzy and nearly passed out. I'd been driving down the road before, like down the highway, and had to pull my car over to the side of the road because I was cramping that bad and it was like I couldn't continue driving. But here's the thing. There's nothing abnormal about my reproductive organs that I know of anyways. It just was like bad period pain for me. So imagine you have this condition, like I can only imagine how painful that must have been. And of course, medicine didn't even really understand what was going on at the time, so they didn't have much to help her out with. So eventually, while she was still a teenager, her mother died. She had been able to like secretly send notes back and forth to her mom through like servants that were still loyal to her, because even though like King Henry had stripped her of her titles and like invalidated their marriage and called her illegitimate, whatever, the people of England were still like supportive of her. And it was kind of like, it looked bad on King Henry to like the people of England. So she still had a lot of support behind her, but she still just was like a child in terrible circumstances. Anyways, so her mom died. She didn't get to say goodbye to her mother. A little bit of relief would come whenever her father, King Henry, decided to execute his second wife, Anne Boleyn. Why? Why not? I think was his general feeling towards it. But this made Mary happy because she despised Anne Boleyn. She felt like she was essentially a homewrecker. This is where I kind of felt like karma set her up a little bit. What I mean by that is, so if you feel like her life up to this point has been pretty terrible, don't worry, because it gets worse. She definitely doesn't deserve everything that happened in her life, but you just should never be happy that someone's being executed, I guess, is the thing. So I kind of feel like, I don't know if you believe in like karma or the universe, that type of a thing. I don't necessarily believe in it, but I'm also not gonna attempt it, if that makes sense. Like, I don't believe that there's actually a bear there, but I'm still not gonna try to poke it. So anyways, she was happy about Anne Boleyn being executed, and I feel like I said, that set her up for some bad karma to come. Maybe, I don't know, or maybe just her life was miserable for whatever reason. And this happened when Mary was like around 20 years old or so. She felt like because Anne Boleyn had now been executed that she could come back into her father's good graces and everything would be okay. He still, though, insisted that she sign that thing saying that she was his illegitimate child. So she didn't want to, but she did. And I thought it was funny, something that I watched said that she had earned back his love. His love? I was like, can we call that love? Anyways, now that Anne Boleyn had been executed and Mary had earned back her father's love, she was like welcomed back into the court. They always refer to it as the court, I guess, like the main palace or whatever. I don't know. She was basically back in the good graces of the king, and throughout her 20s, it kind of seemed like everything was pretty chill for the most part for her. The only thing was that she was an adult, and as we all know, women have biological clocks, right? But King Henry was not so worried about marrying Mary off as he was, going through his own marriages. I think it was like 6 total wives. Some of them died, some of them were killed, some of them he just like got rid of. I don't know. Mary was concerned about not getting married, but she was living comfortably and she was getting along with her little sister, Elizabeth, that she like once completely loathed, remember? Also, she had a new little brother, Edward VI. I can't even remember which of his wives he was the son of. So King Henry was like happy that he finally had a male heir to the throne, right? So King Henry eventually died, and Mary's little brother, Edward, at all of 9 years old, became the new king. He was just a kid, so I mean, it was pretty much like his advisors running the show, right? But the thing was that Edward, the boy king, was not well. His advisors and Mary knew that. Mary felt like she was next in line for the throne, but Edward's advisors knew Mary was still a very devout Catholic, and they knew that if she took the throne, that she would, you know, change things back to Catholicism being the main church of England and blah, 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 blah. So when Edward was 15 years old, he died of tuberculosis. And this is when, like, some drama went down. Mary was, like, somewhere else whenever he died. So when she got word that he had died, she went ahead and, like, declared herself the queen. Her advisors that were with Edward, though, knew about his death before she did. So by the time she had figured out that he died and declared herself the new queen, Edward's advisors had already declared this new chick, Lady Jane Grey of something or other, the new queen. Now, this Lady Grey actually had, like, legitimate claims to the throne. She was the daughter of King Henry VII, which I guess is the one that came before King Henry VIII. Numbers, right? So it's really not like she was out of bounds to go ahead and take over. But at this point, Mary still had a lot of support behind her. So the people of England, like, rallied whenever Edward died and basically overthrew this new Lady Jane of whatever the heck and declared Mary the queen. So what's her face of whatever ended up only being queen for 9 days. And when Mary took the throne, people were, like, so excited that their little Princess Mary, Catherine of Aragon's daughter, because King Henry's first wife was actually quite liked throughout England. So they were just so happy. And once Mary became the queen, it was time to get married. And she decided to marry this guy, Philip, who was he was like the Prince of Spain or the King of Spain or something. I don't know. His relationship was with Spain. And then they also had control over the Netherlands. So it was like a big get for Mary, you know, being the Queen of England. So she married this guy, Philip, who was quite a bit younger than her. Mary really adored this guy, Philip. Philip did not feel quite the same way. At this point, like I said, Mary was 37, which doesn't automatically make you, like, not cute, but Mary was not cute. And I guess he complained to, like, his people that he just didn't like her. He didn't find her attractive. Apparently he was quite a womanizer. He had a lot of mistresses and whatnot. And so, you know, it was just a really super functional, happy marriage. Some of Philip's confidants described her as being not at all pretty, rather small, but quite flabby, and with no eyebrows. Oh, and by the way, she still, of course, is dealing with her endometriosis because it's a condition that, you know, plagued her for her entire life. So there's still just that to keep in mind while you're hearing all of these progressions of her story. Despite this, not too long into their marriage, Mary started to miss her periods. She started to have these little bouts of nausea, and she started to gain weight, particularly in the breast and stomach area. And you all know what that means. Possible ovarian cancer and or hormonal dysfunction. Exactly. Oh, were you thinking maybe she was pregnant? No. That's what she thought. She thought she was pregnant. Prepared for the baby and everything. She was so excited. They also suggested that perhaps it was like a phantom pregnancy, you know, that thing where like a woman just gets so, like they want a child so bad that they end up delusioning themselves into thinking that they're pregnant. So as you can imagine, this was a tough blow for Mary. And I guess whenever they figured out that she wasn't actually pregnant, her husband left. Like he just went somewhere else. I think he went to the Netherlands and just kind of like, you know, goofed around and womanized and whatnot. So now that it was established that she for sure wasn't pregnant, she went ahead and went back to governing the country of England. Basically what she did was she like repealed all of the new Protestant laws, brought back Catholicism to the forefront of England religion. And not only that, she, I guess, brought back some like medieval times laws that allowed for execution for things like heresy. Is it heresy? You know, heretic behavior. Heresy, right? Is that right? Anyways, basically it was now legal to execute people for, you know, acting like not in favor of the Catholic Church or whatever. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, by this point, Mary was not exactly a well-adjusted, happy woman. Once all of these laws were brought back, she started doing things like beheading people and burning them at the stake. At first, it was for stuff like high treason, you know, like the people that had been Edward's advisors that tried to overthrow her were beheaded, which isn't cool, but I guess at the time for like that kind of high treason, that was the norm, you know? So that wasn't that big of a deal at first. But then she started to execute people for things as simple as not being able to recite the Lord's Prayer, like just really trivial matters. I think that the tipping point for the people of England was when she burned a pregnant woman, like a heavily pregnant woman at the stake. Yeah, that happened. And so she very, very quickly and severely fell out of favor with the English people. So, amidst all of this nonsense, her husband, Philip, came back. He came back because he wanted to engage Spain in a war with France, and he needed England's help in the matter. Even though Philip had been whispering behind her back that she was ugly, really didn't care for her at all. Not only that, but they said that when he came back to try and get her to help him, he brought his mistress with him. Despite all of that, Mary agreed to give him military support for this little war that Spain was venturing into. And so, of course, what happens when a country goes to war? They spend money. But she gave him all this help in his war efforts, and Philip was, of course, victorious in this war against France. They won bigly in this war, and it made Philip so happy that he decided he loved his wife. He returned to England and ruled alongside her, mended the fences between the royal family and the people of England. They had 5 sons, and everybody lived happily ever after. Just kidding. No, I mean, I can't remember the exact details of this particular conflict, but it wasn't totally successful. Really what it did was cause Mary to fall even further out of the public's favor. Nobody wanted to enter into this war. Her advisors advised against it, but she did it anyways. Despite this failed attempt at war and the failed attempt at earning her husband's affections that she so desperately wanted, Mary started to experience some very familiar symptoms yet again. She got really sick and developed a distended belly. That's right, folks. She thought she was pregnant again. But if you think that that's the case, then I don't know what story you've been listening to for the past however long. She thought she was pregnant again, but she was not. I can't remember what the name of the actual condition was, but basically she had developed a fatal condition that caused accumulation of fluid underneath the skin, which is what caused her distended belly. The doctors figured out that she wasn't going to make it, and she didn't. And she died. And at this point, you know, after the whole burning people at the stake and going to war and losing a bunch of money, it's not like England was super sad to see her go. Before she died, she had requested to be buried alongside her mother. She wasn't. She was not buried alongside her mother. Instead, she was initially buried in an unmarked grave somewhere. And then when her sister, remember her sister Elizabeth, that replaced her as princess when she was little, and then she had to be her servant for however many years? Remember that one? When she died, she had this big shrine erected at her burial place, which was next to Mary. Mary was given a black slab of marble, and all it said on it was, "Mary the Bloody." And that's it. That's her story. No satisfying resolution at any point during that story. So what do we take away from Mary's story? What can we learn from it? I guess just that needless suffering only leads to more needless suffering. God, I mean, it's a rough story. It's a really tragic life that she had. And I think, like, you know, earlier when I said the whole thing about karma, it's just my attempt at trying to make sense of it. Like, how can someone have such a bad life? Like, it was so bad, you know what I mean? And I thought it was interesting, one video that I watched from Biographics, he mentioned at the end of his video that, you know, she was remembered as Bloody Mary for all of those, you know, executions that she ordered. But not only her predecessors, but also her successors have more blood on their hands than she does. But somehow that's her legacy. I guess because she didn't bring anything else to the table, unfortunately. She didn't give us anything else. She was only queen for 5 years, died at 42, no children. So anyways, yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you want to hear about King Henry next, or even her sister Elizabeth. I find both of them very interesting. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!